In the heart of London, where history and modernity blend seamlessly, stands Buckingham Palace, a grand symbol of British tradition and royalty. The palace is not just a residence for kings and queens. It's also a magnet for tourists from all over the world. On this particular sunny afternoon, thousands of visitors gathered outside its gates, eager to catch a glimpse of something truly unique, the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Among them was Alex, a young traveler from Australia with an adventurous spirit and a camera slung around their neck. Alex had always been fascinated by different cultures. Growing up in a small coastal town, they often dreamed of exploring faraway places and experiencing things beyond their imagination. This trip to Europe was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, and London was high on their list. From Big Ben to the Tower of London, Alex soaked in every moment, snapping photos and collecting memories. But nothing captured their attention quite like the sight of the royal guards stationed near Buckingham Palace. The guards stood tall and motionless, dressed in their striking red tunics and towering bearskin hats. To Alex, they looked like living statues, symbols of discipline, tradition, and pride. Tourists buzzed around them, trying to get the perfect picture or giggling as they attempted to make the guards crack a smile. Some even whispered jokes or waved silly gestures in front of their faces, but the guards remained completely still, unfazed by the chaos around them. Their stoic demeanor only added to the intrigue. As Alex watched, they couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and curiosity. How do they stay so calm? Alex wondered, what would happen if someone really pushed their limits? These questions swirled in their mind, planting a seed of mischief. They remembered seeing videos online of people playfully interacting with the guards, blowing bubbles, pretending to trip, or standing awkwardly close to see if they'd react. It all seemed harmless fun, and Alex thought, why not try something myself? But instead of settling for a simple prank, Alex's imagination took a bolder turn. What if they did something no one else dared to do? Something that would make them stand out in the crowd. The idea began to take shape in their head, growing more irresistible with each passing minute. After all, these guards were known for their unshakable composure. Surely, a little harmless fun wouldn't hurt anyone, right? Little did Alex realize that their innocent fascination was about to spiral into a decision they'd soon regret. Surrounded by the vibrant energy of the crowd and fueled by a desire to create a memorable story, Alex failed to consider the deeper significance of the scene before them. These weren't just ordinary soldiers. They represented centuries of tradition, honor, and respect. And while the guards may have appeared immovable, there were rules and consequences that Alex hadn't fully grasped yet. With excitement bubbling inside them, Alex moved closer to the line of guards, scanning for the perfect opportunity. The air buzzed with anticipation, both from the crowd and within Alex themselves. Unbeknownst to them, this single moment of curiosity was about to set off a chain of events that would leave a lasting impact, not just on their trip, but on their life. As Alex stood there, watching the royal guards with growing fascination, their mind raced with possibilities. The idea of doing something bold, something that would make them stand out in the sea of tourists, was becoming irresistible. They glanced around at the other visitors, snapping photos and laughing as they tried to get reactions from the stoic soldiers. Some blew bubbles toward the guards' faces, while others mimicked their rigid poses or whispered jokes loud enough for those nearby to hear. Everyone seemed to be having fun, but Alex wanted more than just a laugh or a silly picture. They craved an experience that would leave a mark, something they could tell stories about for years to come. The thought of climbing onto one of the guards had first crossed Alex's mind as a fleeting joke, but now it felt like a challenge waiting to happen. What if I actually did it? They mused silently. Their heart began to race at the sheer audacity of the idea. It wasn't every day you got to interact with living symbols of British tradition, after all. And besides, Alex reasoned, the guards didn't seem to react to anything else people threw at them. Surely this wouldn't be any different, or so they convinced themselves. Alex took a step closer to the line of guards, observing each one carefully. One guard in particular caught their eye, a tall figure standing near the edge of the crowd, his posture perfectly straight and his expression unreadable behind the shadow of his towering bearskin hat. Something about him looked almost inviting, as though he were daring someone to test his resolve. Alex hesitated for a moment, glancing around to see if anyone else was paying attention. Most of the tourists were preoccupied with their own antics, leaving Alex feeling emboldened. Their excitement grew as they imagined how incredible a photo would look. Alex perched triumphantly on the shoulders of a royal guard, arms raised in victory, surrounded by gasping onlookers. It would be the ultimate souvenir, proof that they weren't just another faceless tourist passing through London. Social media likes and comments flooded their imagination, fueling their determination even further. But amidst the thrill, a small voice of doubt whispered in the back of Alex's mind. Was this really okay? Weren't there rules against touching or disturbing the guards? Alex pushed the thought aside, reminding themselves that nothing bad had happened to anyone else who'd played pranks on the soldiers earlier. Plus, they figured, the guards were trained professionals. If they didn't like what was happening, they'd simply step away or stop it, right? With that logic in place, Alex decided to go for it. Taking a deep breath, Alex approached the tall guard cautiously, blending into the flow of the crowd until they were close enough to act. Their pulse quickened as they weighed the final decision. Should they really do this? Could they pull it off without getting into trouble? For a split second, Alex considered backing out. But then they remembered the videos they'd seen online, the laughter, the applause. This was their chance to create a memory worth sharing. Without giving it another thought, Alex made up their mind. They hoisted themselves upward, grabbing hold of the guard's shoulders with surprising speed and confidence. For a brief moment, everything seemed frozen in time. Alex balanced precariously on the guard's broad frame, grinning ear to ear as they reached for their phone to snap a photo. But before they could fully process what they'd done, reality came crashing down. The murmurs of amusement from the crowd shifted into gasps of shock, and Alex suddenly realized that this might not end the way they'd envisioned. As Alex's feet left the ground and their hands gripped the shoulders of the towering guard, a strange hush fell over the crowd. For a split second, it felt like time had stopped. The guard beneath them didn't move an inch, his posture remaining as rigid as ever, but there was something unsettling about the stillness. It wasn't the calm, stoic presence Alex had observed just moments ago. It was colder, heavier, almost electric with tension. The crowd, which had been buzzing with lighthearted energy just moments before, now erupted into a mix of gasps, murmurs, and nervous laughter. Some people clapped instinctively, thinking it might be part of some elaborate prank or performance. Others stared in disbelief, unsure whether to cheer or scold. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every angle of the bizarre scene unfolding before them. Tourists craned their necks for a better view, whispering to one another about what they were witnessing. "Is this allowed?" Someone muttered nearby. Another voice chimed in. "I don't think so." Alex, perched awkwardly on the guard's shoulders, tried to steady themselves while fishing for their phone in their pocket. Their initial excitement was beginning to waver, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. The guard's immobility was unnerving. He didn't flinch, didn't turn his head, didn't even blink. It was as if he wasn't human at all, but a statue carved from stone. Yet, Alex could feel the weight of his presence beneath them, a silent, unyielding force that seemed to grow more intimidating with each passing second. Before Alex could snap the photo they'd envisioned, movement caught their eye. Two other guards who had been standing nearby suddenly shifted positions, closing in swiftly. Their boots thudded against the pavement with precision and authority, cutting through the noise of the crowd. Alex froze mid-motion, their heart pounding wildly. Something about the way these soldiers moved, calm yet deliberate, sent a chill down their spine. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was serious business. "Step away immediately," One of the approaching guards commanded in a firm, clipped tone. His voice carried no room for argument, slicing through the chaos like a knife. Alex hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They glanced around, hoping for support from the crowd, but instead found only wide-eyed stares and uneasy silence. Even the tourists who had laughed earlier now looked concerned, realizing that this situation had taken a turn they hadn't anticipated. The guard beneath Alex finally reacted, not with words, but with a subtle adjustment of his stance. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a jolt of panic through Alex. What if he decided to shrug them off? Or worse, what if security intervened in ways they couldn't predict? Panic set in as Alex scrambled to climb down, fumbling awkwardly in their haste. Their foot slipped, causing them to stumble slightly, drawing another collective gasp from the onlookers. By now, several uniformed officers had joined the scene, moving with purpose toward Alex. One of them gently but firmly guided them away from the guards, speaking in low, measured tones. "Come with us, please." There was no aggression in their demeanor, but the seriousness of their expression left no doubt that this was not a request. It was an order. Alex nodded numbly, their earlier bravado evaporating completely. As they were led away, the crowd parted like a wave, creating a path lined with curious faces and whispered commentary. Alex couldn't help but notice the shift in the atmosphere. Moments ago, they'd imagined applause and admiration. Now, all they saw were disapproving glances and shaken heads. The thrill of adventure had vanished, replaced by a sinking realization. They'd crossed a line they didn't fully understand. And as they disappeared behind the palace gates, escorted by stern-faced officials, Alex knew this was only the beginning of whatever consequences awaited them. As Alex was led away from the scene, their mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions: shock, embarrassment, and a growing sense of dread. The cheerful chatter of the crowd faded into the background, replaced by the steady echo of footsteps on the pavement as two security officers escorted them toward a nondescript door near the palace gates. Alex kept their head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, but they could still feel the weight of curious stares boring into them. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though gravity itself was conspiring to remind them of the gravity of their actions. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The bright sunlight and bustling energy of the outdoor ceremony were replaced by dimly lit corridors and an almost suffocating silence. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old stone, adding to the feeling of being in a place steeped in history and authority. Alex was ushered into a small, windowless room where a plain wooden table and a few chairs sat under harsh fluorescent lights. It was nothing like the grandeur of Buckingham Palace outside, but its simplicity only made it feel more intimidating. A stern-looking officer gestured for Alex to sit, then took a seat across from them. His expression was calm but firm, his eyes studying Alex with a mix of curiosity and disapproval. "Do you understand why you're here?" he asked, his tone measured but leaving no room for evasion. Alex nodded slowly, their voice catching in their throat when they tried to speak. They managed a weak yes, barely audible above the hum of the overhead lights. The officer proceeded to explain the seriousness of what had just occurred. Climbing onto a royal guard wasn't just a harmless prank. It was a violation of protocol, an act of disrespect to centuries-old traditions, and potentially a breach of public order laws. He outlined the possible charges: trespassing, disorderly conduct, and even assault, given that physical contact with a member of the royal household or their protective detail was strictly prohibited. Each word landed like a hammer blow, driving home the reality of the situation. Alex listened in stunned silence, their earlier bravado completely gone. They had never intended to cause harm or disrupt anything. They'd simply wanted a fun story to share. But now, faced with the legal implications of their actions, they realized how naive they'd been. The officer's words painted a grim picture: fines, potential jail time, and a criminal record that could follow them long after this trip ended. The thought of explaining all of this to their family back home, or worse, seeing their name in international news headlines, made Alex's stomach churn. To make matters worse, the officer informed Alex that incidents involving the royal guards were treated with particular severity due to their symbolic importance. These men weren't just soldiers, they represented the dignity and heritage of the British monarchy. Any action perceived as undermining that dignity carried significant consequences. Alex swallowed hard, struggling to process everything. They wanted to defend themselves, to explain that it had been a spur-of-the-moment decision fueled by excitement, not malice. But the words wouldn't come. How could they justify something so reckless? After what felt like an eternity, the officer paused, leaning back slightly in his chair. "We'll need your full cooperation moving forward," he said, his tone softening ever so slightly. "This will be documented, and depending on your attitude and willingness to take responsibility, we may consider leniency." Leniency. The word offered a glimmer of hope, however faint. Alex nodded vigorously, desperate to show remorse. "I'm sorry," they blurted out, their voice trembling. "I didn't mean any harm. I really didn't." The officer studied them for a moment longer before nodding curtly. "We'll see about that," he replied, standing up and motioning for Alex to follow him. As they exited the room, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into uncharted territory. What started as a light-hearted attempt to create a memorable experience had spiraled into something far more serious, and while apologies might help, they knew it would take much more than words to undo the damage they'd caused. The days following the incident passed in a blur for Alex, each moment filled with mounting anxiety and regret. News of their reckless stunt spread like wildfire, fueled by viral videos and photos captured by onlookers. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, some mocking, others outraged, and a few expressing disbelief that anyone would dare to climb onto a royal guard. Headlines popped up across international news outlets. Tourists bold stunt shocks Buckingham Palace. Royal Guard incident sparks outrage. And what was this traveler thinking? Back home in Australia, Alex's phone buzzed nonstop with messages from friends and family. At first, they tried to ignore the notifications, too ashamed to face the questions or criticism. But curiosity eventually got the better of them. And when they finally opened their social media accounts, they were met with a flood of comments and shares. Their face, wide-eyed and grinning as they perched awkwardly on the guard's shoulders, was everywhere. Strangers dissected their actions, labeling them everything from reckless to disrespectful. Some even joked about it, turning the moment into memes that circulated endlessly online. At the same time, legal proceedings began to take shape. Alex was summoned to appear in court to answer for their behavior. The charges included trespassing, disorderly conduct, and conduct likely to cause harassment or distress, all serious offenses under British law. As the trial date approached, Alex felt the weight of the world pressing down on them. They spent hours replaying the incident in their mind, wishing they could turn back time and undo what they had done. Sleep became elusive, replaced by restless nights spent staring at the ceiling, imagining worst-case scenarios. On the day of the trial, Alex dressed neatly, hoping to convey sincerity and respect. Walking into the courtroom, they were struck by how formal and intimidating the setting was. Rows of benches lined the room, occupied by curious spectators and journalists eager to document the outcome. A judge sat at the front, his expression unreadable behind thick glasses. Alex's heart raced as they took their seat, flanked by their lawyer, who had advised them to plead guilty and express genuine remorse. When it was time for Alex to speak, their voice trembled as they addressed the court. "Your Honor," they began, swallowing hard to steady themselves, "I deeply regret my actions that day. I never intended to disrespect the royal guards or the traditions they represent. It was a foolish decision made in the heat of the moment, and I am truly sorry for any harm or embarrassment I caused." Their apology was heartfelt, their words laced with emotion. For the first time since the incident, Alex allowed themselves to be vulnerable, acknowledging not only their mistake, but also the lessons they had learned. The judge listened intently before delivering his verdict. He acknowledged Alex's remorse and willingness to take responsibility, but emphasized the importance of upholding the dignity and sanctity of institutions like the Royal Guards. In the end, Alex was fined a substantial amount and ordered to complete community service hours at a local organization dedicated to preserving cultural heritage. While relieved that jail time wasn't part of the sentence, Alex knew the financial and emotional toll would linger for years to come. As they left the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, but Alex kept their head down, avoiding eye contact. Though the immediate legal consequences were clear, the broader impact of their actions was only beginning to sink in. This wasn't just a personal misstep. It was a public spectacle that had tarnished their reputation and tested their ability to make amends. And yet, amid the chaos, one thing was certain. Alex was determined to learn from this experience and ensure it didn't define them forever. In the days following the trial, Alex found themselves at the center of a media storm that showed no signs of calming down. The incident had captured global attention, and it seemed like everyone, from news anchors to late-night talk show hosts, had something to say about it. Clips of Alex awkwardly climbing onto the guard's shoulders were replayed endlessly, accompanied by dramatic commentary and comedic sketches. Social media was ablaze with memes, hashtags, and heated debates. Some people defended Alex as a free-spirited traveler who'd made an honest mistake, while others condemned them as reckless and disrespectful. Back in Australia, Alex's life became a whirlwind of unwanted attention. Friends and acquaintances approached them cautiously, unsure whether to offer support or judgment. Family members alternated between anger and concern, struggling to reconcile the person they knew with the image being broadcast worldwide. Even strangers recognized Alex in public, sometimes offering sarcastic remarks or asking for selfies, a request that left Alex feeling deeply uncomfortable. It was as though their identity had been reduced to one impulsive decision, overshadowing everything else they had ever done. Despite the overwhelming negativity, Alex also received messages of encouragement from unexpected places. A few tourists who had witnessed the incident reached out, sharing their own stories of making mistakes while traveling and urging Alex not to let this define them. One elderly woman wrote a heartfelt letter saying, "We all do things we regret when we're young. What matters is how you rise after falling." These small acts of kindness reminded Alex that redemption was possible, even if the road ahead seemed long and difficult. Determined to take responsibility for their actions, Alex threw themselves into completing their community service requirement. They were assigned to work with a local heritage organization that preserved historical landmarks and educated the public about British culture. At first, Alex felt out of place, unsure of how to contribute meaningfully. But as they spent time learning about the rich history behind institutions like Buckingham Palace and the Royal Guards, they began to see the depth of what they had disrespected. Listening to experts talk passionately about tradition and legacy opened Alex's eyes to the importance of respecting boundaries, not just in travel but in life. During their service, Alex took the initiative to write letters of apology. One was addressed to the royal family, expressing deep regret for disrupting the dignity of their ceremonial guards. Another went to the specific guard Alex had climbed on, thanking him for his professionalism and composure despite the provocation. Though they didn't expect replies, the act of writing these letters brought a sense of closure. For the first time since the incident, Alex felt like they were actively working to repair the damage rather than simply enduring the consequences. As weeks turned into months, the media frenzy gradually died down. New stories emerged to capture public interest, and Alex's name faded from headlines. However, the experience left an indelible mark on them. They started journaling regularly, reflecting on the lessons they had learned and setting goals for personal growth. Traveling was still a passion, but now Alex approached it with a newfound sense of mindfulness. Before visiting any new destination, they researched its customs, traditions, and rules, ensuring they wouldn't repeat past mistakes. By the time their community service ended, Alex felt transformed. They weren't the same carefree adventurer who had arrived in London seeking thrills without considering consequences. Instead, they had become someone more thoughtful, more aware of the impact their actions could have on others. While the memory of the incident would always linger, Alex chose to view it not as a failure but as a turning point, a moment that taught them humility, accountability, and the value of respecting the world around them. Months after the incident, Alex returned to Australia with a suitcase full of souvenirs and a heart heavy with lessons learned. The trip that was supposed to be a carefree adventure had turned into a life-altering experience, one that forced them to confront their own impulsiveness and lack of cultural sensitivity. But instead of letting the weight of their mistake crush them, Alex decided to channel it into something positive. They realized that while they couldn't change what had happened, they could use their story to help others avoid similar missteps. One of the first steps Alex took toward redemption was sharing their experience publicly. At first, the idea of speaking openly about the incident terrified them. The thought of reliving the embarrassment and criticism felt unbearable. But as they reflected on the countless messages from strangers who had reached out during their ordeal, they understood that their story had the potential to resonate with others. With encouragement from friends and family, Alex agreed to give interviews to local newspapers and TV shows, emphasizing accountability and growth rather than excuses or self-pity. In one particularly memorable interview, Alex sat across from a kind but probing journalist who asked, "Do you think people will ever forgive you for what happened?" Alex paused, considering the question carefully before responding. "I don't know if everyone will forgive me, and honestly, I don't expect them to," they admitted. "What I do hope is that my story can serve as a reminder to travelers, to young people, to anyone, that actions have consequences. Sometimes those consequences are bigger than we imagine, especially when we're in unfamiliar places where traditions matter deeply." The interview struck a chord with viewers, many of whom praised Alex for their honesty and willingness to take responsibility. Encouraged by the response, Alex began writing articles and giving talks at schools and community centers about the importance of respecting cultural boundaries while traveling. They titled their presentations, "Lessons from a Mistake," weaving humor and humility into their storytelling to keep audiences engaged. Alex didn't shy away from describing the awkwardness of their trial or the sting of seeing memes made of their face. They embraced it all, using their vulnerability to connect with others. Beyond public speaking, Alex also collaborated with travel bloggers and influencers to create content promoting responsible tourism. Together, they developed guides and videos highlighting do's and don'ts for visiting culturally significant sites around the world. One project focused specifically on iconic landmarks like Buckingham Palace, offering tips on how to appreciate such places without crossing lines of respect. These efforts earned Alex recognition, not just as someone who had messed up, but as someone actively working to make amends. Despite these strides, there were still moments when Alex struggled with lingering guilt. Late at night, lying awake in bed, they would replay the incident in their mind, wondering if they'd truly done enough to make things right. On one such evening, their younger sister knocked on their door, holding a framed photo she'd printed herself. It showed Alex standing in front of Sydney Opera House, smiling confidently during a volunteer event aimed at raising awareness about sustainable travel practices. "This is who you are now," she said simply, placing the frame on Alex's desk. "You've grown so much since then." Her words stuck with Alex, reminding them that growth wasn't about erasing the past, but building a better future. Slowly but surely, Alex began to see themselves not as the person who climbed onto a royal guard, but as the person who used that mistake to become wiser, kinder, and more mindful. While the scars of the incident remained, they no longer defined Alex. Instead, they served as proof that even the most embarrassing mistakes could lead to meaningful change. if one was brave enough to face them head-on. Years later, Alex found themselves sitting on a quiet beach back home in Australia, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The waves lapped gently at the shore, and the salty breeze carried a sense of calm that had been hard to come by in the months following their infamous stunt at Buckingham Palace. Life had changed dramatically since then, and as they reflected on everything they'd been through, Alex couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons learned, the people who stood by them, and the opportunity to grow from their mistakes. The incident had become a distant memory for most, but for Alex, it remained a cornerstone of their personal journey. It taught them that even the smallest decisions could have far-reaching consequences, especially when cultural traditions were involved. They often thought about the royal guards, their unwavering discipline, and the weight of responsibility they carried every day. What once seemed like mere stoicism now appeared to Alex as a profound commitment to duty and respect. That realization stayed with them long after the trial, shaping how they approached not just travel but life itself. Alex's transformation wasn't immediate or easy. There were days when self-doubt crept in, whispering cruel reminders of the ridicule they'd faced. But over time, those voices faded, replaced by a quiet confidence born out of resilience. Their work promoting responsible tourism became a passion project, earning them recognition as a voice for mindful exploration. Schools invited them to speak to students about the importance of understanding and respecting different cultures. Travel agencies sought their advice on crafting ethical itineraries. Even some of the same journalists who had criticized them years ago reached out to commend their efforts to turn a negative experience into something positive. One of the most rewarding aspects of Alex's journey was reconnecting with people they'd met along the way. The elderly woman who had written the heartfelt letter about rising after falling sent another note years later, praising Alex for their courage and growth. "You've proven that mistakes don't define us. They refine us," she wrote. Those words stayed pinned to Alex's bulletin board, a constant reminder of how far they'd come. Travel remained an integral part of Alex's life, but their approach to it evolved significantly. No longer driven by the thrill of novelty or the desire to stand out, they now prioritize meaningful connections and authentic experiences. Whether learning traditional dances in Bali, volunteering at community farms in Peru, or simply listening to locals share stories over cups of tea, Alex embraced each destination with humility and curiosity. They documented these moments not for social media validation, but as a way to inspire others to travel thoughtfully. Perhaps the greatest lesson Alex took away from the ordeal was the power of accountability. Owning up to their actions hadn't been easy, but it had opened doors they never expected. Opportunities to educate, connect, and make amends. They realized that everyone makes mistakes, but what sets people apart is how they choose to respond. By facing their consequences head-on and using them as fuel for change, Alex proved that redemption wasn't just possible, it could be transformative. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Alex smiled softly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They knew the memory of climbing onto that guard's shoulders would always linger, a cautionary tale etched into their mind. But it no longer weighed them down. Instead, it served as a reminder of the strength they discovered within themselves and the endless potential for growth, even in the face of failure. With the tide washing away footprints in the sand, Alex felt ready to move forward, carrying the lessons of the past while embracing whatever adventures lay ahead.